Thank you so much. Welcome everybody to our webinar today about how to use the change
Do I
agent
not
in the
have any sound?
classroom. We're going to be looking especially at our most recent series, which is on immigrants and immigration. And I want to give a special shout out to the New England Literacy Resource Center for hosting this webinar today. The New England Literacy Resource Center serves 5 New England states, and they give a lot of support to the change agent. So thank you, NELRC, and also World Education, which is our home here in Boston. So let me start by introducing myself. My name is Cynthia Peters. I'm the editor of the Change Agent, and I've been doing that for the past 15 years or so. So I have a lot of history with this magazine. I'm also a longtime teacher, and I do professional development all around the country. And I've been encouraging people to introduce yourselves in the chat. Just say where you are, where you're located, maybe what you teach, so we have a sense of who's in the room here today. So thank you very much. And again, welcome. What we're going to do today is look at the role of thematic unity in diverse writings and why that could be helpful in the adult ed classroom. We're going to look specifically at a change agent article in Google slide format called "My Mom is a Brave Woman." I want to share some of the ways that our content is aligned to the college and career readiness standards for reading and writing. Then we're going to do a little bit more of a deep dive into a lesson packet that includes a graphic organizer, and we're going to make this into an interactive activity. So I'm hoping people will participate. And actually, on that note, all along the way, I really hope people will participate. My voice is a little weak. I've been having a cold lately, and so I really hope when I invite you to please unmute and share something that you will. Don't be shy, just unmute yourself and speak up. You can also put your comments in the chat, and Catalina Gonzalez, who's here on the webinar with me, is going to be supporting the process and noticing what's in the chat. And Catalina, please interrupt me whenever it seems appropriate if there's lots going on in the chat. Also, an invitation to put your video on so we can see each other. It would be great to see your faces. Please do mute yourself if you're not talking, because there's a lot of background noise often, and so that can be distracting. So let's get started. Let me just say, by way of introducing the change agent, that the whole idea of the change agent is to promote and lift up student voice. We're a magazine, an online magazine now, that's written almost all by adult learners. And the reason for that is that we want to hear their voices, and we want to make the writings attractive to adult learners. So when adult learners see something written by their peers, that acts as a scaffolding to move in higher and higher levels of complexity and literacy levels, because they're motivated by interest in the author and the writing. The writings in the change agent are multi-level, and we like to share stories of students who are acting as agents of change. It may be in a small way, in their own life, at their school, in their family, in their community, at their workplace. In some kind of way, they're acting as an agent of change. So one thing I wanted to say about this current series is that it's about immigrants and immigration. And there's 3 issues in this series. The first one is called Our Immigration Stories. The second one is called Creating New Community. And the third one is called Finding Our Voices. So that is how the change agent operates these days, is we come up with a theme and we do a 3-part series on that theme. I'm going to show you some of our other issues. We have very diverse themes at the change agent. So I hope people can see my screen. I've just switched over to the change agent website and clicked on this issues tab. And so you can see the first 3 are the ones that I just mentioned. And then the 3 before that are all focused on work during the pandemic, kind of divided into 3 different sub-themes about work during the pandemic. And before we started this 3-part series, we used to just do 2 separate themes a year. So the rest in this list look more like that. There's a special focus on mental health. We did one on the pandemic, one on voting and the census. We did an issue on play, on Indigenous peoples, math, hair, career pathways. You can see the diverse themes that we take on. what we do is we just try to think, well, what's something that adult learners might be interested in? Then we put out a call for articles to get writings by adult learners on that theme. And then we publish it, and I create standards aligned activities to go with each of the stories. So I'm just going to keep scrolling here so you can see more of our topics. And I hope if you have a subscription to the Change Agent, you have access to all these back issues and you can dive into any one of them. And if you click on any one of them, like I'll click on the celebrations issue, you can go down to the table of contents and you can sort that issue by level. So now you can see the stories in that issue and what level they are. This is grade level equivalent. Okay, so each table of contents is sortable by level. So that is the issues tab. And I want to go back now to a conversation here about thematic unity. And maybe what I'll do is I'll stop sharing and Catalina will take notes on this screen, and maybe I'll be able to refresh and you might be able to see some of those notes. But let's just look at each other here and tell me, what do you think? You see the Change Agent has this kind of, sometimes the magazines are in a series, sometimes it's just one issue focused on one topic like mental health. What is the teaching advantage of having a collection of materials focused on a theme? What would be the advantage for you as a teacher, for your students? Can you think of how that might be helpful if you're trying to teach literacy, English, reading, writing? Anybody want to unmute and share something or put something in the chat? Similar set of vocabulary, says Andrea. Yeah, that is a really good point. If you're reading a bunch of articles about immigrants and immigration, you're going to hear the same words. For example, immigrant and immigration, you're going to hear words like border, and you're going to hear all the reasons why people might have left their country, why they might have become refugees. You might hear about war and violence and the economy, a common thread through several lessons. Yes, says Megan Boyle. Exactly. So your learners will get to feel a sense of mastery over a certain set of concepts and a certain set of vocabulary, even if they're working at different levels. Any other reasons, Gail? Go ahead. I saw you unmute, Gail, so I called on you, but you might not have meant to be called on. Does anybody else?
Sorry, I didn't mean to be called on.
Okay. Good to see you here, though, Gail. Anybody else want to offer a reason why that might be helpful? Relevance, yeah. So the issues themselves are just highly relevant to adult learners, and that's going to be a kind of a scaffolding, right? Because people are going to be interested to engage in the topic because they're going to see how it relates to their life. And the Change Agent really aims for that. And even when I think I'm a little bit kind of off the beaten track, like doing an issue on hair or an issue on play, and that feels kind of like not the usual topic for adult ed, but it's amazing how relevant those stories, how much those stories resonate with people. So that's very powerful. Marilyn says different viewpoints on the same issues. And that is a great opportunity, right? To notice what's the same, what's different, to compare and contrast. Those are great college and career readiness skills that are mentioned in the standards. So yes. Good points, everybody. Thank you so much. So now with that under our belts, we're going to kind of, thinking about how the Change Agent provides that, we're going to go ahead and dive into some of the materials. So I wanted to mention that in addition to those range of issues, we also have a range of formats. So I have here on the screen 3 formats. This article happens to come from issue 56, and you can see that we have it as a PDF, so easy to print out. If you're doing in-person classroom, you can just hand out the page to everybody. If you're doing an online classroom, you can upload the PDF into your platform. There's also an audio version of the article, and students can hit those play buttons and hear the text read out loud while they follow along with the text. So that's another format that's available, not for every single article, but for a lot of articles. And then there's something new that we're doing, which is we're putting the articles into Google Slides. And this is great for the in-person or the remote or the hybrid classroom, because everybody can be kind of on board with the same set of text. And so what I want to do now is actually just visit this set of Google Slides. And the way I want to do it is, you could navigate to it if you have a subscription to the Change Agent. You could go to issue 56 and find the Google Slides, but some of you here today might not have a subscription. So I'm going to ask Catalina just to put the link into the chat so you can go directly to the slides. So if everybody, if you don't mind, just click on that hot link right there and go to the slides. I'm going to go to them myself. My mom is a brave woman. I see lots of people arriving here, so well done. People have got getting into the link. If you're on a phone, maybe this is harder to navigate to. Don't worry, I'll have it up on my screen so you can just watch from my screen. You don't have to be able to go straight to it. Ellaline Hill says the slides are great. Oh, good. I'm glad you're looking around in them already. I would love to get a volunteer to read this out loud, though. Actually, since my voice is gone, I need help. Do I have a volunteer? Would you just unmute and offer your reading services? While you're thinking about that, let me mention this first slide. So notice that the link that you all have is a link that anybody who has this link can view these slides, but you can't alter them in any way. So if you as a teacher want to use them as they are, you're all set. This is viewable. You can share the link with all your students. It will be viewable to them, but you can't make any changes to it. If there's something about it that you would like to do differently, for example, you want to insert a quiz, or you want to insert more vocabulary lessons, or whatever you want to do, just you can't change please don't change the story, because that is the student's words, but you can add more teaching tools. And the way to do that is the directions are right here. If you have a Google account, you can go up to File, like I'm doing now, and you can go down to Make a Copy, and you can make a copy of the entire presentation, and now you own it. You are the owner of the slides, and you can manipulate them, adapt them, and do whatever you want to them, and then share that link with your students, right? If you don't have a Google account, you can just download the slides into your software. And then again, you're the owner and you can adapt them. Does that make sense? If you have a question about that, please put it in the chat. I really want people to end this webinar kind of really understanding how to make these resources your own. Okay, so now I hope somebody has decided that in this story about a brave mom, that somebody's going to be a brave participant and read the story out loud. Do I have a volunteer? Please.
I'll read it.
Oh, thank you so much, Andrea. I'll forward the
Okay.
slides as you read.
Okay. A hard decision. One day, Mom sat down in a chair and told us that we were going to the United States to live with our dad. Mom made the decision because she knew that my sister and I were in danger. I was 11 years old. My sisters were 9 years old and 5 years old. Gangs, thirst, La Migra. We took the bus to San Luis, Sonora. This is where we met the coyote. He would take us through the desert through to the US. On the first day, we started walking through the desert. We walked at night. Everything was okay until the third day when gangsters assaulted us. The gangsters took all the money and everything that was valuable. The next day was worse. We encountered a gang called Los Bureros. They are a gang that kidnaps people. Thank God we were able to hide and escape from them. Unfortunately, this gang caught another group of people. As we were running away from them, We could hear shooting and people screaming. On the 5th day, when my sister wanted to pee, I took her behind some bushes. When we came back, everyone had disappeared. We were very scared because we didn't see our mom or sister or the coyote. After a couple minutes, the coyote grabbed us and pulled us behind one of the bushes. He told us to stay quiet since La Migra was around. I didn't know at the time what La Migra was. On the 6th day, we were out of water. We were very thirsty. After a couple of hours, we found a cow's stable. Mom took water from the cow's trough and gave it to us. She didn't say anything at the time, but I still remember the smell and the taste of the water. The next morning, Mom looked bad. She was crying and sat under one of the trees. She told me we were almost there. She removed her shoes and her feet had a lot of blisters. They were bleeding. Stacked like wood in a truck. The last day, we were waiting for a truck to take us to the place where we were going to stay until we could see our dad. When the truck arrived, they piled us on top of each other as if they were stacking wood or pallets. My sister and I were at the top. They took us to a farm near Houston. The people in charge of the farm gave us water and food. That was my first time trying a cheeseburger and fries. One of the ladies took us on a walk through the farm to meet all the animals. We stayed there until they reunited us with our dad. Reward. I still ask myself what would have happened if we had stayed in Mexico. It was a hard journey to come to the United States, but now we have new opportunities and we have learned another language and culture. Every effort and achievement has its own reward, and I can say that Mom already has hers. My mom is a brave woman.
Wow, thank you so much, Andrea. That was beautifully read. Can we just have a little, kind of muted applause for you for stepping up and reading that, sight unseen, but just so beautifully. Thank you so much. Subtle inflection and thank you. Yeah, what do people think about that story? You can use the chat or you can unmute. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Would you use something like that in your classroom? Let's see. Another Andrea says it's a story that is both specific to the author and holds commonality with many of my students. Yeah, good to point that out. I'm really glad you mentioned the specificity of her story, because that's something that if you're ever thinking about having your students submit their writing to the change agent, that's something that I'm always looking for, is the specificity of their story, the details that help really paint a picture. And the details that she shares are so incredibly demonstrative, aren't they? Like where they got water and the blisters on her mom's feet and taking her sister behind a bush to pee. Like the level of detail really reveals so much. So Polly says, very powerful, but I admit I'd use it cautiously. Yes. Thank you very much for saying that, Polly. Also, Megan, I noticed saying I would be nervous to use this. This could bring up a lot of bad memories for learners. Yes, if you had more trauma-informed training, that might be helpful. Marilyn says, definitely a great way to model and get people speaking. I would definitely use it. So I love that there's a range of responses, and thank you to the people who are actually, both enthusiastically embracing it, and then those who are maybe being a little bit more cautious. I always like to say to teachers, you know your classroom, you know your students, you know the level of community and trust that people have. Maybe this is something that you don't start off your class with, but over time, once you've built a sense of community and trust and shared understanding, it might feel more okay to bring something hard like this into the classroom. Because yeah, this could bring up a lot of feelings. It could even be controversial, right? There could be people with some kind of anti-immigrant sentiment that would use this as an opportunity to show anger, which could be a hard thing to navigate in the classroom. It's very wise to realize that you could be setting up some difficult conversations by bringing this into the classroom. And there are change agent articles that are more leaning in that direction and others that less so. So you get to go into the mix and find the ones that are right for you. Yes, Elaine is saying that it would help students not to be ashamed of how they got to this country. Yeah, I mean, I know in my classrooms, when we get to the point where we can talk about how people got into this country, it's very, very warming, very intense, very community building, but it does take a bit to get there. So I really appreciate people's comments. Thank you so much. This is just one example of a story in the change agent. You can see it's earlier in the slides, we had a picture of the author. And then on this slide, we have a little bit of biographical information about her so that the reader can see that the writer, is possibly somebody just like them, an ESOL student, who has goals, academic and career goals. There's also after you read activities, and this is kind of aligned to the standards because I'm asking, the author says her mother is a brave woman. What evidence does she share in the text to back up her claim? So then, your students have to actually go back to the text and find details that show how she brought evidence to bear on her assertion that her mother is brave. And then there's another story that I'm pointing you to. It's called Crossing Two Rivers. It's a similar story of a family coming across the desert with a coyote. This one is from the point of view of a mother writing about bringing her daughters. So we have a story by a daughter talking about the mother, and then a story by a mother talking about bringing the daughter. So it's a kind of a good combination, those two. And they're both available at 2 levels. So that's another option that you sometimes have with a change agent, is 2 articles written at 2 different levels. Okay, so those are the after you read activities. And I want to mention that, we actually read that whole one out loud, but we have a number of pieces now in Google Slides, and I want to just mention a couple of other ones. So this one offers a completely different angle on the immigration story. It's written by a Native American woman. She's a member of the Tono Otham tribe in Arizona, and the ancestral land of this tribe is now in both Arizona and Mexico, right? Because a border, as they say, the border crossed us. We didn't cross the border crossed us. And so I thought having a Native American perspective in an immigration issue would really kind of broaden things out a little bit to get more depth about what immigration means. And she writes about the border wall. There was a border through their territory before the border wall, but it was a much more porous border, and families lived on both sides of the border and kind of flowed back and forth fairly easily. But with the border wall going through their land, they got cut off from their own families and their own community. So she writes about that, and that is also available in Google Slides, and that's in issue 56. And another story, and this is what I mean when I say some of our pieces are a little bit lighter. This one is from issue 57. It's called My Neighbor. And it's a beautiful story by a Massachusetts woman who talks about having a very cranky older man as a neighbor who she used to say hello to, and he would never respond. And she tries different things to make friends with him, including just speaking to him. And then she gives him vegetables from her garden that she grows herself. She shovels his snow. She does little things. And then over time, she makes friends with him. It's a really beautiful story. I think it's something that, again, our anybody, but especially immigrants who are trying to make new community in their new country, would really be able to relate to. So that's a story that maybe would be a little bit less challenging to bring into the classroom. So there's just, I wanted to give you like a little survey of a few different stories available in Google Slides. Okay, so now back to kind of how we have things organized on our website, because I want to leave you with both a global sense of the change agent resources and a more specific sense of the content that we have available. So I showed you the issues tab already, and that you can go to the issues tab and you can find content by issue. So if you're doing something on food and you go, oh, does the change agent have anything on food? Yeah, you can scroll down and you'll find our food issue. If you're doing something on health, you'll find a couple issues on health, physical health and mental health. If you're doing stuff on work or career exploration, you'll find topics like that. So you can explore by theme. You can also explore by level. So sometimes a single issue of the change agent looks too hard. It looks like, oh, this is a wall of text. My students, it's too hard for my students. So if that's the case, you can go to this resources tab and you can go down to this index with article reading levels and audio. And you can click on that. And you can get to this huge global index of all of our articles, and you can sort it by level. And so now you have a lot more content that is quite accessible. And you have the audio versions clearly indicated with the headset, and they're clickable. Okay, so that's another way to get into the change agent content. You won't get very far with this if you don't have a subscription. So for those of you who don't have a subscription, I want you to know that all of these lesson packets are free and don't require any subscription. So there's lots of change agent content here. You can read the headings. And then a lot of the content is available in Google Slides too now. I shouldn't say a lot, but we started doing this during the pandemic. So this is about when we started doing it, and you'll see quite a few different slideshows available. So if you don't have a subscription, you have lots of content that you can still get to. And if you go to this resources tab, you'll see lots of other content that's also available for free, including the entire race issue, which we made free a few years ago. Okay, so I want people to know these three approaches: by issue, by level, and by packet. And then just a reminder, these two, you kind of need the subscription to really go far, very far. Once you click on these, you need a subscription to get into the content. But with the packets, they're free. You don't need a subscription. Again, any questions, just put it in the chat. Catalina, please interrupt me if I'm missing anything there. I'm going to spend a little time on this slide. It looks like a lot of information, and it is, but I just want to make sure people know how to get into the change agent. So for the NELRC states, each of your states has bought a bulk subscription. You probably all know how to log in. If you don't, please hit up Catalina privately and she'll tell you. So those states are Massachusetts, Connecticut, Vermont, Rhode Island, and New Hampshire. There's lots of other states that have bulk accounts. They are Arkansas, Delaware, Louisiana, Maine, Oregon, Texas, Virginia, California libraries, the FACE programs, and some New York City public schools. So if you're in any of those states or regions, you would need to email me. If you don't already know how to log in, you would need to email me to find out, and I'll put you in touch with the right people. For everybody else, you can just subscribe. It's really cheap. It's $30 per teacher per year. You can share your username and password with all your students. If you have a large program with 25 or more teachers, the cost goes down to $20 per teacher per year. So I just want to take enough time to make sure everybody knows that this content is super accessible. It might already be free to you if you're in one of those states. If it's not free to you, it's really, really inexpensive. You will all be getting a copy of these slides in PDF format. So I hope nobody has to be kind of desperately taking notes or anything. You'll get all the links to everything that I've shared with you, including if you're sort of sitting there thinking, what did she say about the issue and the level and the packet? These are all hot links to those exact places that I just mentioned. So when you get the PDF, you'll be able to click on those links. Okay, so I mentioned that the change agent works really hard to be aligned to the standards because I'm thinking about what teachers and students need out there. We're trying to make engaging, empowering, inspiring, motivating content, but at the same time, we want to create activities that are aligned to these standards. Things like, helping students identify what the text says, describing the main idea, being able to say why you think it's the main idea. That's where you're driving the student back to the text to show evidence, being able to explain how an author organizes text, who wrote it, why does it matter, assess how this text connects with other sources. So already we've kind of had different examples of like 2 sources of students talking about crossing the desert, right? So it's multiple sources on a similar topic. And then being able to read widely and deeply from a broad range of text. So that the change agent gives you that. It's right there, ready to use. I'm doing this kind of quickly because I want to just touch on this briefly, but all the standards for writing, when you have your students write, you want them to be able to write all kinds of different texts. You want to stress complexity, reasoning, and using evidence. You want them to be able to write clearly, grammatically, and well organized. They should know their audience. They should plan, revise, use technology and the internet to produce and publish their writing. The change agent gives you lots of opportunities to do that. And we're going to be, actually, our activity includes one of those. So they should be able to research, use different sources, use print and digital sources. They should know how to use information from a source without plagiarizing. Very important academic and work skill. Write routinely over extended timeframes as well as shorter timeframes for multiple tasks, purposes, and audiences. So sometimes you want to write that long essay. Sometimes you just want to be able to write a list. You want to be able to take notes. You want to be able to write an email. You need to be able to write for all kinds of different purposes. So again, the change agent is thinking, and we're thinking about that when we create our activities for you. And for each issue of the change agent, I create a grid which points you to which articles and activities are aligned to which standards. So that's another resource that I hope is helpful. Okay, so any questions about those standards or about anything that I've talked about so far? I see people in the chat are talking about the Tom Hanks movie. I'm not sure how that came out, but I saw that movie. It was good. Okay, so let's go to our activity, which is, let me explain this a little bit. So for those of you who kind of know how to navigate around the change agent website, you could go to lesson packet 29 right now. You could just go to the change agent top page, and then go to the resources tab, and then go down to the lesson packets on the list, and then find your way down to lesson packet number 29. This is an OER, an open educational resource, meaning no subscription required. The packet includes 4 articles about people telling their immigration story. And then it also includes a graphic organizer. And the graphic organizer is a chance for students to organize their thoughts about what pushes and pulls immigrants to leave their country and come to the United States. So let me show you what that, first of all, let me show you what the articles are. There's this one that we just read, My Mom is a Brave Woman, and here it is in PDF format. And then there's the Crossing 2 Rivers, which is that story that I mentioned, which is from the perspective of the mom bringing her children across the river and then the desert. Then there's a story about somebody seeking a better future. And she talks in this one about the lack of jobs in her home country, which I think is Mexico, if I remember correctly. And she also mentions climate change and how the climate is changing the ability to farm the land, and that a lot of people who made their living off the land can't do so anymore. So that's another push to leave the country. And then this writer talks about coming to the United States for her husband's work and then staying or choosing to stay because they wanted to for their son's education. So a bunch of different reasons why people got pushed and pulled to the United States. Actually, this issue is, probably 30 articles on this topic. So I just picked out 4. But if you were teaching from this and you wanted to kind of really keep going and going and going, there are many more articles where you could ask the same question: what pushed and what pulled this writer? And the student would have to kind of try to read the text to come up with an answer to that question. So those are the 4 articles in the packet. And then there is a graphic organizer. And the graphic organizer is set up so that anybody with the link can view it. So you can't actually take notes in that document because it's view only. So it's another one of those situations where you would need to make a copy of it in Google or download it and then share it with your students. The link that is shared with you on the website is not editable. Okay, it's only viewable. But I did make a special graphic organizer for our workshop today, and that is the one I would like Catalina to put into the chat. This one is special. It's anybody with the link can edit. And so, yes, Catalina, it would be great if you could share the packet and the Google Doc. So please remember, use the Google Doc in the chat, not the one that is shared in the lesson packet, because that one is only viewable and the one in the chat is actually editable. So what I'm hoping we can do, we have quite a lot of people here in our webinar, so this might be a little bit of controlled chaos, but I'm hoping it kind of just works itself out. What I would like you to do now is open the lesson packet, read through, if you want, you could read through all the articles, you can skim through all of them. Everybody here already has read the first one, so you don't need to read that one. But maybe choose one of the second 3 and read it, and then go to the Google Doc and take some notes and try out the activity that I'm proposing you could try with students. I like to do the activities myself and have other people do the activities too, so you can kind of see, how it works out. So I hope everybody is able to click on that link and get to the Google Doc. Let me open it myself and see how many people are in there. Yes, I see lots of people in there, so that's great. Great, awesome. People are showing up. Now, to be able to take notes on the document, somebody will need to write the author, the title, the page number, and hopefully it'll just become clear who's typing what. And if you don't feel like messing around in the Google Doc, that's fine. There's plenty of other people who can do that. Just browse through the stories in the packet. Again, that packet is free for anybody to click on. And just read the stories and see, get some more ideas about change agent content. Great. I see people taking notes. You know, in My Mom is a Brave Woman, she was pushed by danger. Mom knew that my sister and I were in danger. And then I love that you incorporated a quote. That's great. That's a really great note-taking skill. So one part of note-taking is just being able to paraphrase, and another part is being able to choose which quotes you want to keep. And then, you know, of course, citing those quotes is going to be an important part of this activity. And you have the information you need to cite the quotes. You have the page number, the author, and the title, and the name of the magazine, maybe somewhere, the change agent. You would need to work with your students on how to do those citations. There's a lot of different stylistic choices about how to do citations. Yeah, great. I see also for the second story that this family was pushed by poverty and lack of resources, especially water, and limited access to education. This is great. This is also really good modeling of note-taking. And then the quote is, I had to walk on mountain roads and across a river to get to school. Yeah, she tells, and again, that level of detail, it just really helps you feel and see and experience what they're sharing. That she doesn't just say, it was hard for me to get to school. She says, I had to walk on mountain roads and across a river. And she even explains, I think, how she had to, like, you know, take off her shoes and socks or something and put everything, you know, and then get across the river and then get dressed again. Thank you all. This is really working out great. I wasn't sure what level of, you know, whenever everybody's working on a Google Doc together, it can be a little messy, but I love what everyone's figuring out. For a better future, that family was pushed by a lack of jobs, by problems with climate change, making farming more difficult, and they were pulled by economic opportunity in the United States. The Price of the American Dream, the pull was the author's husband had a job in aviation. Yeah. And the push away from the competitive educational system in Korea and preferring the US system. Kind of interesting, isn't it? Like what pushes and what pulls, and just the conceptual work of thinking about what pushes and what pulls you. You can see how, you know, even if the learners are at like a sort of intermediate level of English, there's a real conceptual complexity here, which they're going to be able to, that they're going to be very conversant in. And so you're giving them this opportunity to speak and, you know, dialogue on a complex level, but with vocabulary and, you know, with writings that are accessible. So that's one thing about the change agent. Even when the writing is very, very accessible, it's not simplistic. It's not dumbed down in any way. Great. Wow, people did a great job on these notes. Thank you all so much. Let me stop sharing for a second and just see everybody. Yeah, any thoughts about that? We didn't talk yet about the digital literacy component. You know, it's always an option to print out a hard copy of a graphic organizer, and your students can just take notes in the defined space, right? But the thing about a Google Doc is it's malleable. You know, you can put a lot of notes or a little notes, and a lot of people can contribute. And so and there's a digital literacy component there where students are learning to collaborate online. Has anybody done that with their students, or would you consider trying? You can imagine, you know, you would really need to slow this process down, I think, in the classroom. You know, we've gone pretty fast, but I think you would need to slow it down a lot and do a lot of kind of back teaching about Google Docs, about navigating around in there and not messing up other somebody just types something and then somebody deletes it. And, you know, you would need to kind of practice and learn how to do that. What do you think about having those 4 articles with those diverse ideas about being pushed and pulled and, you know, working on that set of content? Anybody want to unmute and say how they might use it? So Pamela's saying I might use Cami or Jamboards. Yeah, another way to get people interacting on the content. Yeah. The Google Doc is just just an idea. And, I want to also remind you, anything I've created that you download or that you make a copy of, you can just adapt it however you want. You can use it. You could just use 2 articles, or you could have people interview each other and then cite the interview instead of the article. Or you could rewrite the instructions, to work better for you. You get to do anything you want, or just have it use it for some completely different project, but you like, the setup is already there and then you can just adapt it. So Megan says, I love it. It's so relatable for immigrant students. Yeah, thanks. I mean, and immigrants get to see too, that there's many diverse forces pushing and pulling people. Cheryl, I might break the class into groups and assign one story to each, and then regroup to discuss, compare, and contrast our findings. Yeah, great idea, Cheryl. The whole idea of working in small groups is really a great transferable skill. Employers are looking for people who know how to collaborate, who know how to work in teams, who know how to show leadership. And so you can often, I don't know about you all, but when I ask my students to get into small groups, there's a certain amount of moaning and groaning that happens. Like they don't really want to do that. But if you are just very transparent about, hey, this is one of the skills, being able to work in a small group is an academic and work skill that we get to work on in the classroom. So great ideas. Marilyn says I might have students read as jigsaw activity, reading different stories. I don't actually know what a jigsaw activity is. Marilyn, would you want to unmute and tell us about that? Maybe everybody knows what that is except for me. I don't know. Ferdinando says, I love jigsaw. Okay, do you want to unmute and tell us what it is, Ferdinando? No.
Marilyn and I work together, so that was kind of to piggyback off of her. So jigsawing is, you take an article, you as the teacher pre-reads the article and divvies it up, whether for example, if it's nonfiction, or sorry, if it's a biography, one section might be on early life, the other section is middle, and the last section is like later on. And so you break it up, and then you tell the students, you 5 are going to read only about the early life and take notes about that. And then at the same time, the other groups of students are reading the later life and middle life. And then at the end, once their small group work is done, they present out and share. So then in the end, everyone has kind of read the article without, fully taking the time to read it. But, there's those soft skills of working in a group, and time management, things of that nature.
That's great. That's awesome. And I really do encourage everybody just to be transparent about those soft skills, also known as transferable skills, and why they matter and why it's important to name them. So great. Well, thanks for sharing that about jigsawing. It sounds like a great activity. All right. Put your comments in the chat if you have any. I'm going to go back to my slideshow here. We just have about 10 more minutes. Got a couple more things I want to do. One is just take a little bit of time. We talked about the standards for writing include, being able to write for various purposes. And so if you have your students just take notes and that's it, or just interview each other and take notes and just leave it at that, that is a great achievement, I think, in the classroom. And point out to people that taking notes is a skill. It's not necessarily second nature how to do that and how to do it well. And so you could just leave the activity at that, at just having taken the notes. But if you want to keep going and you want to have students try to build a piece of writing from the notes, I think that's a great opportunity, because now they have notes from different sources. They're going to have to cite those sources. They're going to have to read their notes carefully and choose what matters to them that they want to write about. What is their thesis statement going to be? What is their main idea going to be? Which details matter to support that main idea? Which details are irrelevant to that main idea, so they can be discarded, right? Because you don't incorporate every single one of your notes necessarily when you're doing a piece of writing. And so you can just kind of continue the process. And I have some of the steps here. You want to encourage people to make an outline, to flesh out their main idea. That whole issue again of how to cite sources. You want students to write a rough draft, get feedback, and then redraft. And that's really important too, because I think students might feel a little discouraged sometimes that it takes so long to come up with a piece of writing, but it really is a process, and the feedback can be really helpful for refining your work and having a better product in the end. So that idea of drafting and redrafting is usually a part of any process where the end result is something that you feel proud of. So those are some steps that you could keep in mind if you want to take students to the next level and have them, come up with a finished piece of writing that they might share in say your program's newsletter, or if it's relevant to the change agent's call for articles, they could submit it to the change agent. So let me talk a little bit about that, because we do have a current call for articles out right now. It was published in February. The due date is early May. So it's not that much time before the deadline. I would be willing to extend it for some of you here if you feel like you have somebody who might get going on something and they just need a little bit more time. Just write to me and let me know. I'm going to put my email in the chat. Also, my email is on the first slide here. So when you get the PDF, you can get my email from that. So the current call, and I think Catalina might have just put it in the chat. Yes, she did. You can go look at it there. It's a Google Doc again. A person can get tired of saying Google Docs, but they are very dominant these days and they are very useful. When you see the Google Doc, you'll notice it has a lot of type on it, a lot of text, a lot of questions, a lot of writing prompts. So if you have students who are more beginners, that might look like a lot to bring in. So you might want to make a copy of that Google Doc or just cut and paste a couple of the questions from there and just share ones that you think are more relevant and more accessible for your students. Don't shy away from the call just because it looks like a lot. Just feel free to dip in and pick out some questions that you think would work for your students. Supporting your students to write for the change agent usually means having them write multiple drafts. It often means asking them to dig deeper. And again, we touched on this issue of trust and community, and some students don't want to be pushed to go deeper, and that's fair. Nobody has to do that. It's certainly not required. But if they want to be published in the change agent, what we're looking for is those pieces that really show. And that might be something hard. It doesn't have to be something hard, but where a person really showed something about themselves and shared details about what something looked like and felt like. And students aren't used to being asked. I think they're usually kind of stay on a more superficial level. So it might take a little prodding on your part or nudging. So if it feels comfortable to nudge and kind of coax, please do so. I would love to get your submissions for this next issue. The theme of this next issue is resilience and success skills. So a lot of the prompts ask things like, what's a challenge that you faced and how did you deal with it? And that challenge could be in your family life, at school, in your community, or at work. You might have responded to it individually or collectively with others. It's really wide ranging. It's totally wide open. Anything that our students have had to face where they felt like they learned something that's worth sharing. Excuse me. So that is our current call for articles. Those articles will be published in a series of 3 issues that will come out during the next school year. And students whose pieces are accepted receive a $50 gift card. And it's a good thing we only have a few minutes left because my voice is really on the way out. I want to mention that Catalina has put our mailing list link in the chat. So if any of you are not on the change agent mailing list, I would love to have you go to that link and sign up. You'll hear from us once a month. And you'll be reminded of things like, oh, there's a new call for articles, or oh, there's a new issue, or oh, a new round of audio is up, or a new set of Google Slides is up, or something like that. So once a month, so you won't be overwhelmed in your inbox by emails from us. And it will just be kind of a reminder that, of what's happening at the change agent. So Katie says, thanks so much for sharing all this. She has to run to another meeting. She's grateful for our time. Thank you so much, Katie. Other people, if you have any questions or comments, I would love to hear, or if you just even have a takeaway from this hour that you feel like most stands out to you, I would love to hear what your takeaway is. Catalina, yes, we are going to share the video and the slides. We can publish them both on the Change Agent website under resources, and I think we can email you the link to the video and include the PDF of the slides. So anybody who attended here today should get an email from us with the PDF and the link to the video. And you feel free to just share that with all of your colleagues. There's nothing private about this. We want as many people to know about it as possible. The change agent is considered the best kept secret in adult ed, and we aim to change that by word of mouth and by letting people know the resources that we have available. So yeah, I see people in the chat sharing some of the things that they're taking away, especially the Google Slides. Polly's asking about how instructors with low-level literacy learners, how they work on writing. Polly, I'll just say quickly about that, the model, using models. So the change agent has a lot of models for beginner writing, and they could copy the model, but kind of introduce their own perspective into it. That's one possibility. Great, Cheryl's looking forward to exploring the lesson packets. Diverse tools, different levels. Great. I see people are, taking away exactly the things that I was hoping you would get from this webinar: the diversity of the content, the diverse levels, and the many different approaches to the content. So, Andrea, what state are you in? She had no idea that the resources were free. Let us know what state you're in. Massachusetts. So Catalina can send you your username and password. And make sure you tell others, all the Massachusetts teachers, and also all of your students. They can all log in. They can go to that list of audio. They can listen to the audio. Great. Oh, I'm so glad. I feel so happy that all of you are here today. And I think my email is in the chat. It's also on the first slide. If you try out any of these things and you want to let me know how it went, even if it went sideways, and you didn't like how it turned out, I would love to hear about it. So please be in touch, and thank you for all you do out there in the world. Bye, everybody. This concludes our webinar.